This talk was given by Roshi Rafe Martin, guiding teacher of the Endless Path Zendo, a lay Buddhist community in Rochester, New York. Join our practice, in person or online, at endlesspathzendo.org.
So today is Saturday, May 16th, 2026, and we will resume reading from Zen Life of Bodhisattvas, one of my books from a couple of years ago. And we've been looking at the nature of Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of Wisdom, who is the patron, shall we say, of the Zendo, the place where actual practice and realization take place. So we're looking now at Chapter 3, Meeting Manjusri Bodhisattva of Wisdom. Manjushri, of course, is the Bodhisattva of Wisdom, face to face. Here's some background about koans, because we'll be looking at a koan of Manjushri today. Koans, while deeply serious, are also funny in an odd, insightful, and freeing sort of way. They can be topsy-turvy, like a Chagall painting, in which lovers float through the air and a many-colored transparent goat contains a village. Realities open, settled ground shifts, odd things happen. A flower is a Dharma teaching. A finger reveals ultimate truth. A branch of coral upholds the moon. Zen is not adverse to or averse to laughter. So here's a quote from R.H. Blythe in his excellent haiku series. This is from Volume 1, Eastern Culture. All real laughter, all laughter from the belly, is to some extent a realization of truth. Truth that the normal mind, with its diffused consciousness and prominent intellectuality, can not only never attain, but can and does continually avoid or obscure. The strange thing is that this world which we wish to be free from is yet the one that we really desire to live in somehow or other. And when you come to think of it, is not the strength of the paroxysm of delight, we even speak of a man dying of laughter, that we have in jokes and wit, and evidence that we are momentarily enlightened Buddhas, raised above morality and religion, beyond life and death, into a timeless, spaceless realm that overflows with perpetual happiness, which is nevertheless this world of hopes and fears, remorse and apprehension. So Blythe always is an interesting commentator. His translations of haiku are, I think, the best. In any case, here's a quote from Herman Melville in Moby Dick. However, a good laugh is a mighty good thing, and rather too scarce a good thing. The more's the pity. The man that has anything bountifully laughable about him, be sure there is more in that man than you perhaps think. And there's this from Dostoevsky in a book of his titled The Adolescent. If you wish to glimpse inside a human soul and get to know a man, just watch him laugh. If he laughs well, he's a good man. I would add, if it laughs well, it's also likely to be a good spiritual tradition. Here's what Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, environmentalist, and Zen elder Gary Snyder has said about koans. I've said this elsewhere, but it's always, I think, good to keep it in mind. The intention of a koan is to make people who are bright in an ordinary way, or ordinary people who are bright in an odd way, work harder and go further into themselves. The language presents an opportunity to perceive a metaphor that calls one not to thought, but to work. Work is performance. Performance is embodiment, and not subject to ordinary rational analysis. It must spring forth freely and spontaneously, as does life for most working people who are always dealing with the immediate. That's one kind of koan. So in a way, we're not talking about language, we're talking about the theater of life. For this to actually work, it needs the relation of student and mentor, in this case, a qualified Zen Roshi in koan tradition. Going into the teacher's room and trying out your view of the koan on him or her is the only way to move through it. Without the mentor, you only dig yourself deeper into the hole, or you make up your own answer, which is invariably wrong. This remarkable practice, developed and handed down for 1,000 years and more, is very refined and does not fit into any exact paradigm of philosophy, rational analysis, or aesthetic strategy. Yet it throws light on them all. I have no doubt that the Buddhist teachings are grounded in the remarkable, almost unique, exquisitely relevant insights of Gautama Shakyamuni, who is well named the Buddha, the realized one. The koans, also known as the kungan, public cases or teaching phrases of Chon, Zen Buddhist practice, go back to his mind and his insight. That was an interview that Gary Snyder did in May of 2008 with the Poetry Foundation. So the Blue Cliff Record, Hekikanoku in Japanese, Pianlu in Chinese, is a collection of 100 koan cases, each with an accompanying introduction, poem, and commentary put into finished form by Master Yuan Wu, which would be Engo in Japanese, in 1052, though begun some 60 years earlier by Master Shuedo, that would be Secho in Japanese. Zen students, like ourselves, in the Harada Yasutani koan line, work on the cases of the Blue Cliff Record after completing those of the Gateless Barrier, Wumenkan or Wumenkwan. So case 35 of the Blue Cliff Record, Manjusri's Threes and Threes, goes like this. Manjushri asked Wu Cho, "Where have you just come from?" Wu Cho replied, "The South." Manjushri said, "How is Southern Buddhism faring?" Wu Cho answered, "The monks of the latter days of the law have little regard for the precepts." Manjushri said, "Are there many or few?" Wu Cho said, "Here around 300, there around 500. Wu Cho then asked Manjushri, "How does Buddhism fare in this part of the world?" Manjushri said, "The worldly and the holy dwell together. Dragons and snakes intermingle." Wu Cho asked, "Are there few or many?" Manjushri said, "In front 3 by 3, in back 3 by 3. What's going on? While wisdom may speak great truths in riddles, it can also hide behind gibberish. Have we been duped? We seem to live in two worlds, one of ordinary problems, difficulties, confusions, the other of peace, love, truth. How painful the one, and how wonderful seeming the other. Who wouldn't want to escape from the complexities of the first and arrive in the haven of the second? But must we live divided lives, unhappy here, yearning for there, even if that wonderful there is now called enlightenment? The latter days of the law is a reference to the classical Buddhist belief known as the Mapo, or Dharma-ending age. This belief held that access to the true Dharma would persist for only 500 years after the Buddha's death or parinirvana. If you practiced sincerely in that period, you would awaken. Then for the next 1,000 years, enlightenment would no longer be in the bag, even for those who practice sincerely. For 10,000 years after this final period, to have begun around the year 1000 of the Common Era, Enlightenment would remain only as a lovely but distant ideal. On this timeline, the Mokpo, or Dharma-ending age, would have begun toward the end of the Tang dynasty, the so-called Golden Age of Zen, and the start of the Song dynasty, which ironically is when the Blue Cliff Record and Gateless Barrier were created, and the practice of realization, which is the heart of Zen tradition, was in full swing. The koan takes this deeply pessimistic view and in a kind of spiritual judo flips it over so that Manjushri's timeless wisdom can emerge. Still, the essential point that it's hard to keep the real thing going when your times are not supportive is hard to dismiss. Wars, pandemics, financial disruption, political corruption, environmental chaos, famine and drought create deep anxieties that willy-nilly push us towards self-protective thoughts and behaviors. Then fame, power, wealth are going to look like our best hedges against a constant sense of threat. In such a dog-eat-dog world, looking out for number one gets baked in. And yet, because things are so difficult, in such times, a willingness to take risks and see for ourselves if there might not be something more can also emerge. What have we got to lose? As always, it's the best of times, the worst of times. In this tale, not just of two cities, but of two realities. Here's the case with some added personal commentary. Manjusri asked Wu Cho, "Where have you just come from?" "What's he getting at?" Wu Cho replied, "The South." Admirably honest, but has the pilgrim floundered? Manjushri said, "How is Southern Buddhism faring?" The Bodhisattva ambles down the mountain. Wu Cho answered, "The monks of the latter days of the law, that is of the Dharma, have little regard for the precepts. Tough times." Wu Cho is an honest man. Manjushri said, "Are there many or few? What difference do numbers make? Maybe a lot, maybe none at all. If many, how many? Is anyone left out? If few, how few? Is there even one? Leaving aside thoughts of many or few, how's your practice going?" Wu Cho said, "Here are about 300, there around 500. Honest to a fault. But as numbers go, it's not bad. Perhaps others may join in. There's security in numbers. Then again, Bodhidharma had only one disciple, and he was a cripple." That's a quote from The Gateless Barrier, case 41. "What number are you?" Wu Cho then asked Manjushri, "How does Buddhism fare in this part of the world?" Turning the spear point, he puts Manjushri on the spot. What part of the world is this part? By the way, Wu Cho, as we'll see soon, never knew he was talking with Manjushri. The case sees through the mask. Manjushri said, "The worldly and the holy dwell together. Dragons and snakes intermingle." What kind of world is this? We have dictators and Dalai Lamas, black widow spiders and emotional support dogs. Manjushri tells it like it is. Does anyone understand? Wu Cho asked, "Are there few or many?" He repeats Manjushri's question, exposing himself to the return arrow. Manjushri said, "In front, 3 by 3. In back, 3 by 3. Bullseye! The setup pays off." It can't be grasped. There's no place to take hold. Gone beyond wisdom is inaccessible to reason. Or is Manjushri just babbling? We must realize the meaning, not imitate the illogic. Yuan Wu's commentary, which is like 1,000-year-old extended director's cut of this story, reveals both the backstory and its aftermath. The essence is that Wu Cho, a Buddhist pilgrim to Mount Wutai, which was sacred to Manjushri, got lost at night on the mountainside. So this is all in Yuan Wu's commentary, which gives us, as I said, the backstory. Then Manjushri created an illusory temple for the lost pilgrim to take shelter in, and taking the form of an old man, like the temple groundskeeper, he approached and asked. So Wu Cho thought he was talking with the temple groundskeeper, an old man. And he asked, "Where have you come from?" initiating the dialogue of the koan. Later, when they had tea together, the old man held up a crystal bowl or cup and asked, "Do they also have this in the South?" Wu Cho said, "No." "Then what do they drink tea from?" said the old man, a response that left Wu Cho speechless. Perhaps he was starting to sense that something unusual was going on. In the morning, the old man directed a young attendant to show their guest out to the temple gate. Wu Cho asked the boy. The old man said, "In front 3 by 3, in back 3 by 3. How many is this?" The boy responded, "Oh, worthy." Wu Cho said, "Yes, a worthy would be addressing an ordained monk, which is what Wu Cho was. Oh, worthy or venerable." Wu Cho said, "Yes." The boy said, "How many is this?" The sharp-witted boy, it turns out, is also Manjushri. Wu Cho asked then, "What temple is this?" The boy pointed to the guardian figures at the temple entrance. Traditional temples, Zen temples in Japan and China. Mostly I'm thinking in China, less so maybe in Japan, I don't remember. But I know when we were in China, when you come up to one of the old Zen temples, you see these powerful guardian figures, really scary, really kind of muscled and sometimes holding a weapon or something. And they're like, if you know your Joseph Campbell, Hero with 1,000 Faces, they're the guardian figures protecting the sacred realm, checking to see, are you really worthy of coming in? Do you have what it takes? Because you have to go past these terrifying figures. And then when you're inside and you turn around and look what you just passed, what you see is like that smiling Hotai figure that's at the top of our stairs right there. Big joke when you are able to get your nerve together and go through beyond the guardian figures. Of course, Hotai is a figure, an emanation of the future Buddha, Maitreya, the kindly one, the compassionate one, the gently smiling one. Some people have gotten mixed up and think, Hotai is like the fat Buddha. And no, that's a complete misconception. He's seen as a wandering monk, very ordinary, big-bellied, big-eared, handing out gifts, completely selfless. He's like the figure in the 10th and last ox herding picture. But this is not Shakyamuni Buddha. That's a kind of misapprehension on the part of the culture, perhaps having spent too much time in Chinese restaurants in his youth. In any case, where sometimes you see figures like that, but that's not the Buddha. So in any case, it's the other side of the terrifying guardians is Maitreya's emanation, Hotai. So, to get back to where we were, Wu Cho asked, "What temple is this?" The boy pointed to the guardian figures at the temple entrance. When Wu Cho turned to look, the temple and the boy vanished. He found himself alone in an empty valley, the vast empty sky above, and the towering crags of the Blue Mountains, his only actual companions. Bodhidharma, who brought Indian Buddhism to China and turned it into what we now know as Zen, was asked, What is the highest teaching of the Buddha Dharma? He said, vast emptiness, nothing to be called holy. Wu Cho looks like he stepped right into that here. There was nothing there. Later, Wu Cho was cook at a temple on Mount Wu Tai. This was a very important position, temple cook, reserved for senior monks, as the community's health depended on the cook's attention, his virtue, the depth of his practice, his ability not to get flustered when things get stressful. Otherwise, people would end up in the infirmary, not in the zendo. So he was preparing, so Wu Cho kind of stuck around on Mount Wu Tai and eventually was the cook at one of the temples there. When he was preparing rice, how about this? Manjushri would sometimes appear as a vision in the steam rising from the pot where he was cooking rice. When that happened, Wu Cho, at this later time, would hit at the apparition with his wooden spoon to drive it away. Clearly, he had matured. This was truly attending to Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of great wisdom, vast emptiness, nothing to even be called holy, nothing to grasp with the mind at all. The unique genius of Zen is on full display in this koan. In it, a complex visionary event is condensed down into something personal and intimate. Zen delights in taking episodes of Buddhist vision and myth, entire chapters of sutras, and turning them into concise koans. We see the same process of empowerment at work, the same delight in condensation and miniaturization unfolding throughout history, when the structures of large, community-wide ceremonies are absorbed into oral tales, and eventually from there are recreated as written literature, texts that can be carried and transported around, but still retain a power to change, move, and even transform us. Interesting how big ceremonies that required many people, the whole community, in time, become oral tales, many of them, and then become literature that can be carried around in a pocket and opened at one's leisure. This process of miniaturization goes on in our world today, when room-sized computers are condensed down into even more powerful cell phones, a process we should expect to continue as quantum computers appear on the scene. Koans, we might say, are the cell phones of myth. The power of the larger structure is still there, alive in the koan, but amplified by its process of condensation. The ancient truth that power dwells in the smallest things seems almost hard for us to miss these days, living as we do with E equals mc squared, with the silicon chip, and with our expanding knowledge of the immense library stored in the spiraling of our infinitely small DNA. Great power in small things. Still, belief in the Mappo can't simply be ignored as so much superstition. It too emerges from something truthful. Remember, the Mappo is the degenerate age of the Dharma, when things don't really seem to be in your favor in terms of working on yourself for real. So what's been lost? I mean, progress is never one way. There's been a lot of progress in many areas, but what's been lost? Not to overly romanticize things, there was a time when human beings lived in greater harmony with and awareness of the living earth, and human communities fostered spiritual growth and maturity as the way of the true human being. Ceremonies, vision quests, pilgrimage were all part of our ancestors' lives. These days, however, we are on our own, and it's up to each of us to find ways to mature, even as our times are making it abundantly clear that it is our own immaturity that is killing us and our world. One problem, of course, is that we also know that even if we do our best, personally, we can still end up feeling anxious, even hopeless. The more aware we become, the more problems we uncover. And so the worse we can feel. Doing our best, then, can look like doing very little. This is our own version of living in the Mapo. So greater numbers can indeed feel encouraging, providing us with a degree of hope that will reach a tipping point. Plus, it's a relief to feel we're not alone. Long ago, I was in a workshop given by poet and men's movement leader Robert Bly. He said, and rightly so, having companions increases our courage. This is good to know and is the foundation of Sangha, of working together for good and meaningful and compassionate goals. But there's also something about numbers that's not quite so straightforward. The greater the number of people involved, the greater the need for organizational structures, hierarchies, and bureaucracies, and forms and systems can become thought of as the teaching. We take less personal responsibility in groups. In giving away our power, we become small. The traditional advice for Teisho, like what we're doing now, is to listen as if the talk were directed to you alone. You're not at a group lecture. You're practicing, and the Teisho is being directed to you alone, as if no one else was there, and you're the only recipient. That attitude transforms what a Teisho is. Being alone with it. At one point in his commentary on The Heart of Perfect Wisdom, Hakuin, who's really so funny and brilliant, says something about prajna, great prajna wisdom is in the text. And Hakuin's comment is, give me a small wisdom. How small? How small? Aloneness has nothing to do with loneliness. Rather, it is empowering. So there's a danger in numbers. More can be less, and less can be more. Well, there is one reality. Can there be two? In this koan, we meet with two radically different versions of it. In the one, a number of people are practicing and doing their best. In the other, there's no way to grasp or to count. No way to know how it's going. So what numbers and what Dharma ending age are you even talking about? Is this ordinary life holy or worldly? If saints and sinners, fire-breathing dragon-like practitioners and ordinary garden-variety sitters intermingle, how can we tell which is which? Are there many or few? Yamada Roshi writes, think of a public bath in traditional Japan, stripped of everything and all in it together. How is that for the worldly and saints live together? Dragons and snakes are mixed with each other. Personal reminiscence, when I flew to Japan in 1989, I'd been invited to do some speaking in a variety of schools and a couple of universities. It was a long flight from here to Tokyo, and then, I don't remember how many hours, but a lot. And then when you get there, you go through customs, and then I first had to get on a train, I guess, to get into Tokyo, so the hours are really mounting. Then I had to get a bus from the train, so it's got to be like 30 hours of traveling at this point. And to meet somebody on the other side of Tokyo, because I was going to stay in a small town, maybe an hour and a half by outside Tokyo. And he had been an American high school teacher, married a Japanese woman who was teaching in high school in Japan. Really great guy. He was rugby player, I think. A very interesting fellow and a photographer. And he ran their astronomy club also at the high school. Anyway, so he drives through Tokyo to pick me up. So it's now like I can't even figure how many hours I've been traveling completely. Like, there I am with my luggage in outer space. And we get to the small town where he and his wife had their apartment. First thing we did was put my stuff in and go to the local sento, the Japanese traditional communal Japanese bath. One side is for men, one side is for women. You go in there, you take off all your clothes, you bathe first with a bucket, a pan of water and soap, and then you get in and soak in the hot water, and that's men and women together are in that, not in the changing areas. And that was my introduction to Japan. And it was actually very grounding after all that flying and traveling, just to be soaking in very hot water. And it was like stones, kind of lava-like stones is the outside of the sento. It was quite great. It was really a kind of very traditional life still going on there. In any case, how's that? Dragons and snakes mixed together. How can you tell? You're all in the hot water together without any clothes on. None of your hierarchies, none of your uniforms. No one's wearing a suit. Nobody's wearing blue jeans. Who's who? What's what? Can't tell. The koan says that even when things don't seem to be going well, original mind and the realization of it, this true world, as seen by and as the wisdom of Manjushri, is always accessible. Which doesn't mean that it's easy. Times can be hard, and such times can make this possibility of actual realization of the ancient way, touching base with that for real, seem and feel impossibly far off, chimerical and distant. But, says this koan, the possibility of realization of entrance into Manjushri's insight and Manjushri's world is always there. This is a very hopeful message, especially in times like our own, that seem so inhuman, so callous, so uncaring, so antithetical to everything we most deeply wish would be. When Wu Cho first visited Mount Wu Tai, spoke with Manjushri, and was later shown out, he looked back and saw nothing, just an empty valley and overarching sky. Appearances can be deceptive. Maybe this was his big moment, his real meeting with Manjushri. Nothing at all. In the Transmission of the Lamp, biographies of Zen ancestors, compiled around the year 1000, Fengkan, a Zen master who is said to ride tigers, also met with an old man up on Mount Wu Tai. During his encounter, Fengkan asked the old man directly if he might not be Manjushri. The old man answered, "Can there be two Manjushris?" It's said that upon hearing this response, Fengkan immediately bowed. But by the time he straightened up from his bow, the old man had vanished. Then again, when Wu Cho in our koan case was sheltered in the illusory temple and spoke with an old man who was Manjushri and a boy attended who was also Manjushri, wasn't it real to him? Weren't these events as real for Wu Cho as the events of our own lives now? And yet there was nothing. Though this is not a point in the koan, it touches something worth exploring nonetheless. And yet, Manjushri's 3x3 front, 3x3 back, is the intimate point. Through it, like Wu Cho, we too can meet the Bodhisattva right now, today, face to face. There are religions that claim we can move from this present world of trials and challenges, and by leading good lives here, will, after death, find ourselves in heaven, where we will undoubtedly receive fulfillment and reward. But let me ask, do we really want to wait until our actual life is over to discover if this is true or not? And what kind of life or world might this create? Perhaps the very kind of world we now have, a world seen as a mere way station to something better, a disposable and so uncared for world. Perhaps it leads to the very difficulties and problems we now globally face and know too well. And what if sadly, all of it springs from a mistake in how we use our own mind? Manjushri says, come on, you can do better. How shall we live in this place of challenge and difficulty and find satisfaction, meaning, and joy right where we actually are? How is this difficult world the very place we seek? This is the assurance of Zen Master Hakuin Zazen Wasan, Song in Praise of Zazen, which concludes, this place where we stand is the pure lotus land, and this very body, the body of Buddha. Given what we see and deal with every day, how can this possibly be? Was even the great teacher Hakuin wearing rose-colored glasses? Case 37 of the Book of Serenity, the Shoyoroku, Kweishan's, that would be Isan in Japanese, Kweishan's karmic consciousness, the case, puts it like this. Kweishan asked Yongshan, suppose a man asks you, how about one who says all sentient beings are in a disorderly karmic consciousness and have no base to rely upon? How would you treat him? Yongshan said, if a man appears, I call to him. When he turns his head, instantly I say, what is that? I wait while he hesitates, and then I say to him, there is not only disorderly karmic consciousness, but there is no base to rely upon. Kweishan said, oh, good. Oh, good. There's no base to rely upon? There's just disorderly karmic consciousness with nothing to rely upon? And Kweishan says, oh, good. In Genesis, the Creator brings forth night and day, arranges the heavens, produces the sun, moon, earth, with its many fruit-bearing trees and countless living beings. And at each advancing stage of creation, we hear something very much like this saying, oh, good. And it was good right here, where East and West seem to fundamentally agree, might be a good place to take our stand and find out what such goodness really means. Manjushri's 3x3 front, 3x3 back might be a very good place to start. So we have a few minutes, and I wanted to read you just a little bit from a book of letters and basically a conversation between Gary Snyder and an activist, professor, writer in South Africa, Julia Martin. There was about 30 years of correspondence between them called Nobody Home, Writing, Buddhism, and Living in Places. So a couple of things I'd like to share with you, because it just seems topical very much in terms of especially lay practice, which Gary is really a wonderful model for. One of the things he says is, in Zen, there is a need at least for 3 to 5 day retreat practice periodically. And really, ideally, maybe a couple of years in a monastic or ashramic condition where one can intensely focus on the practice and culture of Buddhism. So we try and combine things here in terms of providing 3 to 5 day sesshin, which I think are optimal for lay people, to be honest. I think 7 day sesshin for people working and people with families requires too much preparation and then a kind of reintegration afterward. And really can take a big bite out of life. But I think 3 to 5 days really gives you a chance to work very hard without some of the exhausting consequences of a 7 day sesshin. And I found Nelson, when I was doing some sesshin with Nelson Foster Roshi, Aiken Roshi's there some years ago, he would do, I think, no more than about a 4 or 5 day sesshin, generally. And that was what Gary was recommending here, too. He said, we don't have to invoke a monastic practice, but I still can't see any way around periods of retreat to get your practice really working. We do have to imagine some kind of communitarian practice in which the interaction of people sharing the same goals with the same discipline is part of the training. In other words, Sangha, and I go back to that quote of Robert Bly's, having companions increases our courage. It's very hard to do this alone. Sangha, knowing others are doing this, they're ordinary people, just like we ourselves are working hard at this, gives the courage to go deeper, to trust our own minds, and trust the tradition which allows us to bring forth that mind. It's really an ongoing process. Let's see, Gary also says, one can practice Buddhism in a broad way and possibly even Zen in a broad way without connection to traditional teachers anywhere in the world. But the style and actual accomplishments and teachings that are within something like Rinzai tradition, he means Rinzai-based koan tradition training, require direct contact at some point with someone trained in that tradition. Let's see, where's the other piece? What did I do with that? Of course, hang on one sec. 175. Well, wait a minute. Okay. He says this, which is interesting. I'm a bit dismayed by the direction American Buddhism seems to be heading, with less and less sense of the archetypal, the mythic, and the religious, and less attention to the actual history of the Buddhist tradition as it goes towards therapy and a kind of watered-down reflection of liberal Protestantism. I suppose that was inevitable. Otherwise, as in most of the rest of the world, we look at the direction of the powers that be with dismay. And that's certainly true. We look at the direction of the powers that be with dismay. And one thing, certainly, my experience is that here we emphasize the mythic and the, for lack of a better word, religious. And Roshi Kapleau had a real sensitivity towards the mythic, not the psychological. And I think that was a very, very important part of his contribution to Western Zen. So we'll stop here, turn the laptop around, stop the recording so we can face the Buddha and Manjushri, and as well as Kannon, Bodhisattva of Compassion, on the altar.